Hey family.
Hi guys.
It's Tuesday, so it's time for another short tip. This week's short tip is a continuation of last week. Hopefully you watched the tip last week, Don't Be a Quitter. We're just going to call this Don't Be a Quitter Part 2. Is that cool?
Or Hang in There Part 2.
Hang in there Part 2, because if you'll understand if you saw the first video. So hang in there Part 2.
Yeah.
All right.
So we were talking on Sunday. We were talking to a friend, giving, a few mentoring tips about relationships and stuff like that. And you came up with a really, really good analogy
Okay.
that I thought was really great, and I wanted you to share it for the rest of our friends.
Okay. Well, if we were to subtitle this, we'd subtitle it Cruising Altitude. Talking about hanging in there. We're talking about not being a quitter, dealing with the difficult things that come up and not going away, right? Not leaving your marriage or your relationship. And if you think about an airplane ride, when you get in an airplane, you take off, and as you take off, you're climbing, right? You're continuing to climb. During that climbing period, there's certain things that can't take place. You can't move around the cabin. You have to be strapped in. For a period of time, you can't use your devices. It's very restrictive. It feels very restrictive while you're climbing. Once you get to a certain altitude, the pilot gets on the speaker and says, we're at such and such feet, 35,000 feet. We're at our cruising altitude, and you may now move around the cabin. Things become a little bit less restrictive. That is just how a relationship is. When you first get married, you're climbing. There are certain things that you're going to deal with in your first few years or 5 years or 10 years, however long it takes, that are going to feel kind of restrictive. You're going to go through some things that are a little bumpy. Sometimes when you're climbing in the airplane, it's a little turbulent while you're climbing. So they want you to make sure that you're grounded and that you're strapped in. And those are the types of things that you're going to go through in your relationship. And you need to stay strapped in, learn how to navigate those restrictive periods of time, right? You may have to use the bathroom on the plane, but you learn to hold it because you can't move around. You may want to check something on your phone, but you can't at that period of time because your phone is in airplane mode. So you have to learn to work around that. So you may just listen to music on your phone in the time being. You may do something that gets you through that period. It's the same thing that you do in your relationship until you get to that cruising altitude. Now, what that cruising altitude is just a period of time in your relationship where things are going a little bit smoother. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything's okay, but now you can kind of do some things different. In the airplane, you can move around the cabin now. You can turn on your devices. There's different things that you can do. And that's the point that you want to get to in your relationship. You want to get to the cruising altitude in your relationship, because when you're at that cruising altitude, now things don't feel as restrictive. You've learned how to manage the restrictive portion of your relationship, and now it allows you to move about a little bit freer in your relationship. Now, it doesn't mean that everything's okay, because we've been on airplane rides where even during that cruising altitude, the pilot comes back on and says, hey, you know what? We need you to sit back down. We need you to strap back in because it's going to get a little bit bumpy.
I didn't like that.
Yeah, that's not a good time, right?
Right.
But you learn how to manage that period of time because you had to manage it while you were climbing. So it's not as difficult. You know what to expect. You strap in. You may even say a prayer in the airplane, oh God. Right? The same thing you need to do in your relationship. During those times, you may need to call on God. You may need to strap in and get grounded, buckle down, make it through that time.
That's good.
So that you can continue to go and get to whatever your destination is. We call the destination complete intimacy, right? You're trying to get to complete intimacy. That's your destination. But the trip there,
The learning curve.
there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be a climbing period.
Yeah.
You're going to eventually go through those things that happen in the climbing period. You're going to get to a cruising altitude. That cruising altitude, hopefully, by the time you've gotten to that cruising altitude, you've been able to navigate and deal with the restrictive periods of your relationship. And you can manage those things a little bit better.
and you manage. When you're at the cruising altitude, it doesn't mean that, okay, now I don't have to do anything. What you do is you use those skills that you learned while you were going up. What's it called?
Climbing.
Climbing. You use those skills, right? When you're cruising, you have to still use those skills, because when the airplane, like you said on Sunday, when the airplane is cruising, or when you've reached the altitude that you want to reach, the plane doesn't stop,
Right.
right? You
Right.
keep going. And so what you do is you use those skills that you used while you were climbing as you're cruising,
Yeah.
right?
So we just want to leave that with you. Hang in there, right? I talked to someone who is 4 years into their marriage, right? They're just climbing right now, right? 5, 6, 7, 8+ years, we were still climbing, still strapped in, still trying to navigate the restrictiveness that we felt, still trying to figure out how we can stay strapped in, and how do we keep ourselves from needing to do certain things, and how do we navigate what we're feeling during this period of time. How do we navigate the turbulence that we're feeling.
Yeah.
But we got to a cruising altitude, and it's not that our marriage is perfect.
Right.
We still go through some things, but that climbing period taught us to be able to manage some things a little bit more effectively.
Yeah.
So now when we run through whatever scenarios that are challenging,
Yeah.
we know how to manage it a little bit better.
Right.
Never in an airplane ride, during the climbing period and the turbulence, would you ask to jump out the door. It's not an option.
And never would they decelerate their speed. It
Right.
has to go at a certain
It
speed.
has to go at a certain speed. You have to experience those things
Yeah.
in your relationship. You have to go through those things in order to get to the cruising altitude.
Yeah.
So don't try to jump out the plane. Strap down. Learn to navigate. As I said, don't be a quitter. As she said, hang in there.
Yeah.
You will get to the cruising altitude if you just hang in there. And that's what I shared on Sunday.
Yeah, and I loved it. I thought it was a great short tip.
So that's our tip for you. Hang in there, right? Go through the climbing period. Get to the cruising altitude. Learn how to manage the turbulence on the way up so that you can manage any turbulence that comes up while you're at the cruising altitude. You're going to be all right.
You will be. Hang in there.
I promise. You're going to be all right. That is our tip for you today. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hang in there. That's all we have for you today. God bless.
God bless.